The pharmacist who had filled my family's prescriptions for 19 years grabbed my elbow in the parking lot of her own store and pulled me behind a delivery van where the cameras couldn't see us. "Your son-in-law is overdosing your wife on purpose," she said fast and low, not looking at me but at the door she'd just come out of. "Don't go back inside acting strange. Don't call him. If he knows I told you, those refill records vanish and so does my license." I thought she'd finally cracked. My son-in-law was the one who drove my wife to every appointment, who organized her pills into those little plastic boxes with the days of the week, who sat up with her the night she came home from the hospital. But the pharmacist wasn't guessing. Her hands were shaking and her eyes were wet, and she was certain in a way that guessing never is. 40 minutes later, sitting in a back office while a bank fraud investigator turned his laptop toward me, I understood that the man my daughter married had spent the better part of a year quietly trying to erase my wife from her own life so he could take everything she'd built. "Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right where you are, because that afternoon in the parking lot in Charlotte, North Carolina, I thought I was just a tired old man whose wife was slipping away from a cruel disease. I had no earthly idea I was standing at the front edge of the deepest betrayal a family can survive. My name is Cornell, and at 68 I had every reason to call my life a good one. I grew up the fifth of 6 kids in a house on the west side of Charlotte where the roof leaked over the kitchen and my mother stretched a Sunday chicken across 3 days. I started hauling lumber for a contractor when I was 17, learned the trade, and by 30 I'd opened my own outfit doing home repairs and small builds. 40 years later, that little outfit had grown into a company with 4 locations, a fleet of trucks, 2 commercial buildings I owned outright, and a name that meant something when a banker shook my hand. I'd done well. But none of it, not one nail of it, mattered to me the way Odessa did. I married my wife when we were both 23. She came up out of a little town in South Carolina with a voice like Sunday morning and a backbone like a railroad tie. Odessa taught 2nd grade for 31 years at a school 3 miles from where we raised our kids. And there are grown men and women all over this city who still call her Mrs. O and still mean it when they say she changed their lives. 45 years we were married. 45 years of building something out of nothing, of burying her mother and then mine, of weathering the kind of trouble that snaps most marriages clean in half. She was the smartest person I ever met about money, about wood, about weather, but mostly about people. Odessa could read a stranger across a room in 10 seconds and tell you exactly what they wanted from you. She was almost never wrong. The few times I waved her off and went my own way, I paid for it. You'd think a man would learn. A little over a year before that day in the parking lot, my wife had a small stroke. The doctors called it a TIA, a warning shot. She bounced back fast mostly, but it scared us, and it scared our daughter more. Our girl, Janelle, was 34, our youngest, the sensitive one, the one who cried at long-distance commercials. She'd married a man named Spencer 2 years before, and after the stroke they sold their condo and moved into the in-law suite over our garage, the one I'd built myself for exactly this kind of season. Spencer said it made sense. He'd give up the lease, save toward a down payment, and be on hand to help with Odessa's care. He was a financial advisor, worked at one of those wealth management shops downtown, wore good shoes and a watch that cost more than my first truck. Charming as anything. Looked you dead in the eye when he talked, remembered your kids' names, laughed at the right time. Everybody liked Spencer. Everybody except my wife. "That man is doing arithmetic every time he looks at us," Odessa told me one night, not 3 weeks after they moved in, while she rubbed lotion into her hands at the bathroom sink. He asked me at dinner whether the buildings on Tryon Street were paid off. Asked me how the trust was set up. Who does that, Cornell? Who sits at a man's table eating his food and inventories the estate between bites? He's in finance, baby. That's how his mind runs. He's probably trying to help. She looked at me in the mirror with those deep brown eyes that had been seeing through me since the Carter administration. There's a difference between a man who wants to help you keep your money and a man who's measuring it for himself. I know which one is sleeping over my garage. I told her she was being hard on the boy, that Janelle was happy, that we ought to be grateful our daughter had married a man with a steady head and a good income instead of some of the wild ones she brought home in her 20s. Odessa let it go, but she didn't change her mind. She never did. I should have listened. Lord, I should have always listened to that woman. The decline started so slow, I told myself I was imagining it. Odessa, who'd bounced back so well from the stroke, began to fade again, but different this time. Foggy. She'd lose the thread of a conversation halfway through. She'd go to make her famous peach cobbler and forget the sugar, then stand in the kitchen near tears because she couldn't understand how. She slept 12, 14 hours and woke up groggy. She mixed up the grandkids' names. One Tuesday, she got turned around driving home from the church she'd attended for 40 years, and a sheriff's deputy had to bring her back. Her neurologist ran scans and blood work and frowned and used the word that turned my stomach to ice water: dementia. Possibly vascular, possibly the start of something worse, accelerated by the stroke. They adjusted her medications. Spencer took over managing them, said it was too much for me to keep straight with the business. And I let him because I was scared and grateful and tired, and because he seemed so capable, lining up those little pill boxes on the counter every Sunday night. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that my son-in-law was the dementia. It came apart on a Thursday. Odessa collapsed in the kitchen, just folded up against the cabinets, and by the time the ambulance got her to the hospital, her breathing was shallow and her heart was doing something it wasn't supposed to. They pumped her stomach and ran a tox screen as a matter of course, and the numbers that came back didn't add up. The levels of her sedative and her blood pressure medication in her blood were far, far higher than anything her prescriptions could account for. Way past confusion, past dangerous, close to fatal. The ER doctor, a young woman who looked like she hadn't slept since residency, asked me very carefully whether my wife might have taken extra pills herself, whether she'd been confused about her dosing. And it was the pharmacist, Marguerite, who'd come up to the hospital when she heard Mrs. O was in the ER, who waited until I stepped into the hall for coffee and followed me out to that parking lot and put her hand on my arm. "I've been filling Odessa's prescriptions since her daughter was in middle school," she said. "I pull a refill history twice a month because I worry about her. Cornell, somebody has been refilling that sedative 3 times faster than she could possibly be taking it at the prescribed dose. Somebody's been getting early refills at 2 other pharmacies across town using her information. And the only person who's picked up a single one of those bottles in 11 months is your son-in-law." My legs went out from under me a little. I caught myself on the side of that van. "He's not just managing her pills," she went on. "He's stockpiling them, and he's been giving her too many. I think on purpose. I think he's been making her look like she's losing her mind." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to tell that woman she'd lost her own. But my mind was already running back over the year, over every foggy morning and forgotten word. Every time Spencer had said gently, so gently, in front of doctors and family, "Mom seems worse today, doesn't she?" Planting the idea like a seed. Every time he suggested, oh so reasonably, that maybe it was time to talk about a facility, about getting the legal side in order while Odessa could still sign, about durable power of attorney and updating the trust so things would be simple for the family later. Janelle had cried and signed as a witness to whatever her husband put in front of her, trusting him the way I'd trusted him, the way Odessa never had. The bank investigator was a man named Holloway, sent over by the regional bank's fraud unit because 2 days earlier an automated alert had flagged a string of transfers out of a money market account that had Odessa's name on it. He met me in the hospital social worker's office and turned his laptop so I could see. Over the past 9 months, just shy of $400,000 had moved out of my wife's accounts in small, careful increments, never large enough to require the kind of approval that gets a human being on the phone. Some of it had gone to a newly opened LLC. Some to pay down a second mortgage I didn't know existed on a property I'd never heard of. Some, the cruelest part, had been routed to look like it was covering Odessa's medical expenses, so that on paper it appeared we were spending it on her care. "Whoever did this knows the system," Holloway said. "Knows the reporting thresholds, knows how to structure withdrawals, knows how to make theft look like estate planning. This is a professional." He paused. "Mr. Cornell, I have to ask, who has power of attorney over your wife's affairs?" The answer settled in my chest like a load of wet sand. 6 months back, in a lawyer's office, I'd been too busy and too rattled to vet. My wife had signed a durable power of attorney naming our son-in-law as her agent. And there'd been an amendment to our living trust, the one I'd set up 20 years prior to protect everything I'd built, naming him as successor trustee should both Odessa and I be declared incapacitated. He'd presented it as a formality. Janelle had been so relieved someone competent was handling it. I'd signed my own paperwork, barely reading it, because the man across the table was family, was my baby girl's husband. And you don't read the fine print when family hands you a pen. He's not just stealing the money, I heard myself say. He's setting it up so that when she's declared crazy and I'm declared too old to know better, he runs the whole thing. That's exactly what he's doing, Holloway said. And the overdose Thursday tells me he's gotten impatient. He doesn't want her diagnosed with dementia anymore. He wants her gone. A grieving widower is easy to manage. A dead wife can't change her trust back. I had to sit down on the floor of that office. A grown man, a man who'd carried 100-pound bundles of shingles up a ladder in August, and I sat down on the linoleum with my back against a filing cabinet because I could not make my body hold itself up. My wife was lying 40 feet away with a tube down her throat because the man who called her mom had been feeding her poison disguised as care, and I had watched it happen for a year and called him a good son and told my wife she was being hard on the boy. Holloway crouched down to my level. I need you to do something very difficult. I need you to go back in that hospital and act like nothing has changed. Don't confront him. Don't change a single thing, because right now he doesn't know we're watching, and that's the only advantage we've got. He explained it to me the way you explain a thing to a man in shock, slow and twice. If we tipped Spencer off, the money would scatter into accounts we'd never trace. He'd lawyer up. A slick attorney would argue that Odessa took her own pills in a state of confusion, that the early refills were innocent caregiving, that the financial moves were authorized by a valid power of attorney signed by a competent woman. Reasonable doubt. And the worst part, the part that put steel in my spine, was when Holloway said, "Men who do this don't stop. If he walks, he finds another vulnerable person, maybe one who doesn't have a pharmacist who loves her." "What do you need from me?" I said. "Time. And one thing more." He hesitated. "Don't tell your daughter. Not yet. We don't know if she's part of it or if she's being used. Either way, if she knows, he'll know inside the hour." That was the cut that went the deepest. Looking ahead at the days I'd have to spend in the same house as my own child, not knowing whether my Janelle had helped this man try to murder her mother for money. I drove home that night, and she met me at the door with red eyes and threw her arms around me and said, "Daddy, is Mama going to be okay?" And I held my little girl and could not tell whether I was holding a victim or an accomplice. And that uncertainty was its own kind of poison. The plan came together over the next 2 weeks. The hospital, now quietly looped in, treated Odessa for the overdose and held her under the cover story that her medications had been badly out of balance and they were stabilizing her. Spencer visited every day. He brought flowers. He held her hand and told her he was so worried. And I stood in the corner of that room and watched him perform devotion and wanted to put him through the window. On the 4th day, when he and Janelle had gone down to the cafeteria, I closed the door and sat on the edge of my wife's bed and told her the truth, because I will not be a man who keeps the truth from the woman he's loved for 45 years, no matter what a detective says. Her eyes were clearer than they'd been in months, now that the drugs were leaving her. She listened to all of it without a sound. The refills, the bank, the trust, the power of attorney, the plan. I watched her face go from confusion to horror to a fury so cold it frightened me, and then to something quiet and terrible and calm. "I told you," she whispered, "a year ago in our bathroom. I told you that man was doing arithmetic." "You did, and I told you that you were being hard on him." My voice broke. "I'm so sorry, Odessa. I'm sorrier than I've got words for." She reached up and took my face in both her hands, and her grip was stronger than I'd felt from her in a year. "Don't waste my time being sorry, old man. We are going to catch him, and then we are going to make sure he never does this to another soul as long as he lives. You hear me? Now help me sit up. I have got to look weak when that snake comes back from the cafeteria, and I am out of practice. And God help me. When Spencer walked back into that room, my wife let her eyes go soft and unfocused and her words go slow. And she took his hand and called him sweetheart, and thanked him for taking such good care of her. And if I hadn't seen the bank records with my own 2 eyes, I'd have believed every second of it. The man should have been on a stage. We brought her home a week later, and the trap was already set. The fraud unit had frozen and flagged the accounts in a way that wouldn't alert him. leaving just enough accessible that he wouldn't panic. A detective named Reyes, working the elder abuse case alongside Holloway, had put a small camera in the kitchen, aimed at the counter where Spencer prepared Odessa's meals and her evening tea. Because the pharmacy theory was that he'd moved from pills she swallowed to crushing extra doses into her food and drink, which is harder to refuse and harder to count. They'd also gotten a warrant to monitor his phone. The first few days, nothing. Spencer was attentive, careful, the perfect son-in-law, and I started to wonder, the way you do, whether we'd built a monster out of a misunderstanding, whether I was about to blow my family to pieces over a bank glitch and a worried pharmacist. On the 6th morning, Reyes called before sunrise. "We've got him." The kitchen camera had caught Spencer at 5:50 a.m., before anyone else stirred, taking a small amber bottle from inside his jacket, tapping 3 capsules onto the counter, opening them with a practiced little twist, and stirring the powder into the smoothie he made my wife every morning, the one he'd insisted she needed for her strength. He did it the way a man does a thing he's done 100 times without hesitation, without looking over his shoulder, because for a year nobody had been looking. "There's more," Reyes said. "We pulled a call from 2 nights ago, and he played me a recording, a call my son-in-law had made to a man the records identified as his business partner in that new LLC, a man named Trevor. It's basically done," Spencer's voice said, easy and warm, the same voice that called my wife Mom. "The doctors have her down as advancing dementia, it's all in the chart. Once she's gone, the trust amendment makes me trustee, and the old man's already convinced himself he's losing his own grip. He forgets things, so I make sure to mention it in front of people. Give it 6 months and I petition for conservatorship over him too. Then it's all under one roof." The 4 stores, both buildings on Tryon, the cash, call it $6 million before we even sell the real estate. "And your wife?" Trevor asked. "She gonna be a problem?" A little laugh. "Janelle signs whatever I put in front of her. She thinks she's protecting her parents. She cries every night about her mama's mind going. She has got no idea, and she never will, because by the time the dust settles, I'll be the heartbroken widower's son-in-law holding it all together. I'll keep her around till the estate clears probate, then we'll see." "Man, that's cold." "That's not cold," my son-in-law said. "That's a plan. Cold is being born with nothing, and watching a man hand his daughter a $6 million life she didn't earn. I'm just correcting the math." I set the phone down on my desk very gently, because if I'd held it 1 second longer, I'd have thrown it through the wall. My hands wouldn't stop. This man had married my daughter as a transaction. He'd moved into the home I built with my own hands as a staging ground. He'd dimmed the light of my wife's beautiful mind a little more every single morning for money. And he'd done it while my child slept beside him believing she'd married a good man. 2 victims under my roof, and I'd been too proud to see either one. Detective Reyes gave me a choice, same as in the movies. Except it wasn't a movie, it was my kitchen and my wife. Arrest him now on what they had, which was plenty, or wait for one more clean, documented dose to make the case airtight and cut off every avenue his lawyer might use. Everything in me wanted to walk up those garage stairs and drag him out by his expensive collar. But I thought about Odessa, sitting up in that hospital bed telling me to be smart. "One more morning," I said, "but my wife does not drink another drop of anything that man touches." "She won't," Reyes said. "We've got an officer who'll be in your kitchen at 5 every morning, in the utility uniform, supposedly checking the water heater. He pulls the smoothie Spencer makes and swaps it for an identical clean one before your wife ever lifts the glass. She drinks safe and she keeps acting tired. Can she do that?" My wife, when I told her, smiled the kind of smile I hadn't seen on her since before the stroke. "Honey," she said, "I taught 2nd grade for 31 years. I've been acting tired around people who were trying to drain the life out of me since 1986. Let that boy make me all the smoothies he wants." For 3 more mornings it went exactly like that. Spencer crept down at 5:50 and laced my wife's drink. At 5:10, the officer had already switched it. Odessa drank a clean smoothie and then sat at the breakfast table and let her eyes go vague, let her hand tremble around her coffee cup, let Spencer fuss over her and say, loud enough for me to hear, "Mom, you seem a little more foggy today, don't you, sweetheart?" Planting that seed one more time, not knowing the camera over the cabinet was watching him do it. On the third of those mornings, he brought her the laced smoothie himself, set it down in front of her with both hands like an offering, and said, "Drink up, Mom, you need your strength." And my wife looked that man in the eye and said, "Bless your heart, you take such good care of me," and drank the safe one Reyes's officer had left, and I had to leave the room so my face wouldn't give us away. On the 8th day, Reyes called and said the words I'd been waiting on. "We have everything. Video of 4 separate doses, pharmacy records across 3 stores, spanning 11 months, the bank trail, the phone call laying out the whole plan and the motive in his own words. Counselor, this is the cleanest elder abuse and attempted murder case I've put together in a long career." "When?" I said. "Tonight, if you're willing. Invite the 2 of them to dinner. We make the arrest in your home, where it's controlled and where we can separate your daughter from her husband and watch her face when she learns the truth. If she's innocent, that's how we'll know." That evening, my wife cooked dinner for the first time in over a year. I tried to stop her, told her to sit, but she shooed me out of her own kitchen with a wooden spoon. She made smothered pork chops and rice, collard greens cooked down with smoked turkey, cornbread in the cast iron skillet that had been her mother's, and a peach cobbler, the real one, with the sugar, every bit of it from memory. She moved slow and she had to rest against the counter twice, but there was a fire in that kitchen I'd thought we'd lost. "If this is the last meal I cook for that man," she said, salting the greens with more vigor than they strictly required, "it is going to be the finest thing he has ever put in his mouth." Spencer was delighted to see his mother-in-law up and cooking. "Mom, look at you. You seem so much sharper tonight. Maybe that new medication regimen is finally working." Janelle cried a little at the stove, hugging her mother, and Odessa held our daughter and looked at me over her shoulder with an expression I'll carry to my grave, because in it was every prayer she'd whispered that our girl was innocent. We sat down at the dining table, the same table where I'd signed away power over my wife's life 6 months earlier without reading it. Spencer poured the wine. He told a funny story about a client. He complimented every dish. He was warm and easy and perfect, and I understood watching him that this was the most dangerous kind of evil there is, the kind that doesn't look like anything at all. Halfway through dinner, the doorbell rang. "I've got it," I said, and my voice was steadier than I had any right to expect. Detective Reyes stood on my porch with Holloway and 2 officers in uniform. I let them in. Spencer's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Janelle looked confused, and my son-in-law went very, very still, not surprised, not afraid, just still, the way a snake goes still when the grass moves, deciding. "Spencer," Reyes said, walking to the table, "you're under arrest for financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, identity theft, and the attempted murder of Odessa by repeated poisoning. You have the right to remain silent." The room came apart. Janelle screamed. Spencer started to stand, and an officer's hand was on his shoulder. My daughter looked from him to me, to her mother, her face breaking into 100 pieces. "Daddy, what is this? This is insane." Spencer would never tell them. Somebody tell them. And my son-in-law in handcuffs looked at my daughter and said, calm as Sunday, "Don't say a word, Janelle. Call Bregman. Don't say anything to anyone. Not, this is a mistake. Not, I'm innocent. Just legal instructions." And I watched the truth of it land on my daughter like a building falling. "Sit down, baby girl," I said. "There's something you have to see." Reyes set a laptop on the table, pushing the cobbler aside, and played the kitchen footage. Spencer at the counter, the amber bottle, the capsules, the powder in the smoothie. 4 separate mornings stacked one after another. My daughter watched with her hand over her mouth. Then Reyes played the call. She thinks she's protecting her parents. She has got no idea, and she never will. That's not cold. That's a plan. Janelle made a sound I had never heard a human being make, like the wind knocked clean out of her soul, and she turned to her husband and whispered, "Is it true?" He didn't answer. His face had gone smooth and empty. The charm switched off like a lamp, and underneath it there was nothing at all. No shame, no love, just a man already calculating his appeal. "Is it true?" she screamed. "You wouldn't understand," he said flatly. "You've never had nothing. You were handed all of this. I had to take what I was owed." It was my wife who answered him. She rose from the head of her own table, all 5 feet 3 inches of a woman who had been poisoned for a year, and was still standing. and she said in a voice quiet and hard as a hammer, "Owd. You called drugging me every morning being owed. I welcomed you into my home. I sewed the button on your coat. I prayed for you by name, and you repaid me by trying to put me in the ground and steal my children's birthright." She didn't shout. She didn't have to. "You did not earn one thing in this house. You stole, and now you are going to spend the best years of your life paying for it." They let him out. He didn't look back at my daughter, not once. The door shut behind him, and the house went into that awful hollow quiet that comes after something can never be undone. Janelle slid down to the floor against the wall and wept like I hadn't seen her weep since she was a child. "I didn't know, Mama. I swear before God I didn't know. I helped him. I witnessed those papers. I gave them to you to sign. I was helping him kill you, and I thought I was saving you." And my wife, who had every right on this earth to be bitter, got down onto that floor with her bad knees and gathered our daughter into her arms the way she had when Janelle was 6 and the world was too big. "You didn't do this," Odessa said. "He did. The fact that he fooled you, that he fooled your father, that he fooled me into doubting my own self for a year, that doesn't make you guilty. It makes you a woman who loved the wrong man with her whole heart, and that is not a sin, baby. That is just a wound. We'll heal it together." I sat down on the floor with both of them, my whole remaining family, and I held them while my daughter cried herself empty, and I learned something about my wife in that hour that 45 years of marriage hadn't fully taught me. Her strength was never in surviving the poison. Her strength was in choosing, with the guilty man barely out the door, to love her daughter louder than she hated him. The trial came 8 months later. His lawyer tried the predictable things, that Odessa had taken the pills herself in her confusion, that the financial moves were authorized by a valid power of attorney, that the call with Trevor was just a man venting. The jury didn't blink. 4 recorded poisonings, 11 months of refill fraud across 3 pharmacies, $400,000 in traced theft, and that phone call played twice in closing arguments. His own warm voice saying, "I'm just correcting the math," left no room anywhere for doubt. They convicted him on every count. The judge, a silver-haired woman who looked at my son-in-law like he was something scraped off a shoe, sentenced him to 28 years. Trevor took a plea and got 9. Every dollar they could claw back, they did. Janelle filed for divorce before the ink dried on the verdict. She moved into a little apartment in Noda and took a job at a non-profit that helps elderly folks protect themselves from exactly the kind of theft that nearly killed her mother, and she's good at it, because she knows from the inside how the wolf smiles. She didn't ask me for a dime, though Lord knows I offered. She said she needed to build something that was only hers. Odessa's recovery was slow. The drugs had done real damage, and getting her body and her mind back was a long climb. There were weeks I feared the fog was permanent, that the man had stolen the second half of her life even from prison. But week by week, she came back to me. The cobbler stopped having missing ingredients. The grandkids' names came easy again. By the following spring, she was back out in her garden by 6 in the morning, fussing at the squirrels and the deer. And the woman who'd once forgotten her way home from a church she'd attended for 40 years could tell you exactly where every single tomato plant was and who dared to step on her marigolds. One evening, maybe 9 months after the trial, I came home to find my wife on the porch with a letter in her lap. "It's from him," she said. "Some program at the prison he wants to write to Janelle. He's asking my permission first, if you can imagine the nerve. 4 pages about accountability and growth." She looked at it a long while. Then she folded it back into its envelope and set it down beside her iced tea. "I'm going to write him back," she said. "Odessa, not because he deserves a word from me, because I refuse to let that man turn me into somebody who can't show grace. He tried to take my life and my mind and my money. I am not about to hand him my character on top of it. As for Janelle reading his letters, that's between her and God. She's a grown woman, but what I told her, I'll tell you. Forgiveness is a road, not a finish line. You walk it at your own pace, and you don't owe anybody a single mile faster than you're able." This past Sunday, our whole family gathered in our backyard for Odessa's 68th birthday. Janelle baked the cake herself, lopsided and overfrosted and absolutely perfect. Our son drove up from Atlanta with his wife and our 2 grandbabies. who spent the entire afternoon picking my wife's tomatoes before they were ripe until she chased them across the yard with the garden hose, laughing harder than I'd heard her laugh in 2 years. After the little ones went down, my daughter and I sat on the porch in the dark listening to the crickets. "Daddy," she said quietly, "when you found out what he was doing, did you ever think I was part of it?" I owed her the truth. For about a day, baby, I wasn't sure. She nodded slow. "I don't blame you. I'd have wondered too." She wiped her eyes. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "That's not a thing fathers do," I said, and put my arm around my girl. Looking back, I made the costliest mistake of my life, and it wasn't a financial one. I dismissed my wife's instincts because they made me uncomfortable. Odessa read that man correctly inside of 3 weeks, and I spent a year telling her she was being hard on him, until being hard on him would have been the thing that saved her. So hear me, whoever you are, watching this wherever you are. When the person who loves you most in this world tells you that something is wrong with somebody, do not wait. Do not wait for the bank statement. Do not wait for the talk screen. Listen the day they say it, because by the time the proof is undeniable, the damage may be done. And family is not a word you inherit. It's a thing you prove every single morning by what you do when nobody's looking. That man had the ring and the last name and the seat at my table, and he was never family. He was a predator wearing a son-in-law's smile. The ones who are family are the pharmacist who risked her license in a parking lot, the daughter who turned her whole life into a shield for other people's parents, the son who drove 4 hours through the night. By name, no. By love, everyone. And if you are out there right now living with somebody everyone calls wonderful, and that wonderful person is leaving you a little weaker, a little more confused, a little more dependent every month, and your own gut is whispering that something is wrong while the whole world tells you you're imagining it, I am begging you to trust yourself. You are not crazy. You are not ungrateful. You are not too old. You are seeing the thing everybody else refuses to see, and it may be the thing that saves your life. My wife is in the kitchen as I tell you this. I can smell the cobbler from the porch, and I can hear her muttering at the oven because she's let the edges go a little too dark, the way she always does, and in a minute she'll come out here and blame it on me for distracting her. She's alive. Her mind is her own. We are together, and there's not a number in any bank ledger anywhere on this earth worth more than that. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had somebody close to you that everybody trusted, but something deep in your gut told you to be afraid? Did you listen, or did you talk yourself out of it the way I almost did? Tell me your story down in the comments, because every story somebody shares is a warning that might just save a stranger's life. If this meant something to you tonight, do me a kindness and tap that subscribe button there for Voices of Uncle Vincent, and share this with somebody you love who needs to hear it. And remember what my Odessa always says. You cannot read a person's heart, but you can watch their hands. What a person does when they think nobody is looking will tell you everything you ever need to know. Stay safe out there. Stay wise. And take good care of the people who actually take care of you.